Good evening. I'd like to call to order this regular town council meeting for Tuesday, June 23rd. I'm going to start with an announcement just for the benefit of those who have not participated with us via this platform in the past. We do have some new names. So I'm going to ask members of the public, please keep your microphones muted during the meeting unless you're the person asking a question. Also, kindly keep your camera inactive unless you are speaking. This system does not deal well with multiple simultaneous speakers, and we are creating a recording for the record. So the audio from only one person will come through at a time. Therefore, please only speak if you have been recognized. I do not have a traditional wooden gavel here at my workstation. I don't need one because I have a mute all button. If people are not participating respectfully, I will be forced to mute all so that the person who has the floor can be heard. We'll go through the agenda. If you wish to question or comment on a particular agenda item, please type into the chat bar that you will. If you look up in one corner of your screen, for those of you who are logged in with a screen, there's a chat bubble. If you click on that, a bar appears and you can send me a message, and I will do my best to recognize people in order. After I am done going through those who are logged in digitally, I will try to accommodate those who have telephoned in. If you intend to comment as a member of the public, you must introduce yourself. You must give us your name and your address. This meeting is a little complicated by virtue of an executive session that we will go to in the middle of the meeting. What we learned the last time we went into executive session is that we lose the meeting that we log out of to go into executive session. So for members of the public who want to continue to participating in the meeting after our executive session, there is a second login on the agenda. So when we go into executive session for purposes of the GoToMeeting platform, this meeting will end and the second meeting will begin after executive session. It's for FOI purposes, it's one and the same meeting, but we're going to have a second login for the rest of the meeting's public session. With that, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Fishbein.
Here.
Laffin.
Here.
Marone.
Here.
Morgenstein. Here. Shortell.
Here.
Tata.
Here.
Testa. Sandri.
Here.
Chairman Cervoni.
Here.
Mayor Dickinson.
Here.
Jim Bowes.
Present.
Attorney Farrell.
Here.
Thank you very much. Can someone let me know when and if Vinnie Tester comes?
Yep.
Thank you, Tom.
All right. Can I have a motion on the consent agenda, please?
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve or accept consent agenda items A through H.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none. Madam Clerk, I think we have all ayes.
Yep.
Thank you. On to item 4. There are no items removed from the consent agenda. Item 5 is the renewed public question and answer period. Since we haven't had it in a while, I'm going to remind us of the rules. The public question and answer period is a total of 20 minutes. Each speaker is entitled to 3 minutes of speaking time as a maximum. With that, I open the public question and answer period. I do not see any requests in the chat bubble. Mr. Martin.
Thank you. Ben Martin, Ward Street. I just wanted to say that we're seeing across the nation people standing up for racial justice, and we're seeing changes being made by communities all across the nation in the name of making things better for all people. And I think that if Councillor Fishbein really wants to be of service to the community, he would resign his position. That would show that Wallingford is a community that responds to this kind of.
You're not going to stop talking. I'm going to mute you. Mr. Martin, we have rules of decorum in the council rules. If you go to Rule 16B, it precludes you from addressing people personally with respect to these meetings. So I'd ask you, before you continue your comments, to review Rule 16B of the council rules. These meetings are not intended for personal attacks.
I will say that I don't believe I was attacking anyone, but I will rephrase as any counselor that has harmed the reputation of Wallingford should see it as his or her responsibility to resign so that the community of Wallingford can reflect to the nation and the rest of the state a better face in the current times when we are trying to make improvements to racial relations. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public question and answer? All right. With that, I close the public question and answer period, and if I could have a motion to go into executive session pursuant to 6B.
Mr. Chairman, I move we go into executive session pursuant to Connecticut General State Statute, Section 1-210B4, with regard to the possible settlement regarding FERC docket EL 1619000.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilor Shortell with the second. All right, we'll have a roll call vote on the motion to go into executive session, please.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
just a comment, as the mayor, we don't need an executive session unless there are questions with regard to strategies, positions of other parties, etc. If all we're going to do is describe what the settlement is, then there's no need for an executive session. I just want to make that clear. The executive session is only if there are questions interested in the various positions of parties and the strategies and approach we used, and obviously the result is before us.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for that clarification. My inclination is to give the council the opportunity to question in executive session, because I believe that the council is going to have questions with respect to strategy and negotiations of this pending claim. If there is a sense that we want to hear what this claim is about first in public session, I don't have a problem with that. I just believe that any questioning by the council is going to lead to strategy and negotiations and require the executive session.
That's fine. No problem.
I'm trying to concentrate a little bit on this. Okay. That's okay.
All right. We have a rogue microphone here.
Yeah, I
Madam
got it.
Clerk, would you please call the roll on the executive session?
Certainly. Fishbein,
Mr. Chairman, I just, if I don't get the code for executive session, I don't think I'll vote in favor of it. I don't have the code at this time, so
None of us have it at this time. So I promise you that as soon as we call the roll, I will transmit the password.
thank you, sir. And with that, I vote in favor. Thank you. Yes.
Chairman Cervoni, are you going to get the password to the PUC people?
Mr. Hendershot has assured me that he will take care of it.
Very good. I'll continue on my quest. Fishbein was a yes, right?
Yes.
Thank you. Laffin,
Yes.
Marone,
Yes.
Morgenstein,
Yes.
Shortell,
Yes.
Tata.
Yes.
There's no tester, right?
Right.
Zandri
Yes.
and Chairman Cervoni.
Yes,
Okay,
right.
motion to go into executive session passes.
thank you. We will suspend the regular meeting. And if those of you who want to meet us at the rest of the meeting, you can go to the second login in advance. With that, I'm going to stop the recording and close this portion of the meeting.
This conference is no longer being recorded.
Is there a motion to come out of the executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor of coming out of executive session indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Madam Clerk, we have all ayes. I declare the meeting back in public session. With that, we have a presentation on item 6A. Mr. Hendershot and Attorney Coyle, I invite you to bring us up to speed for the benefit of the public.
Mr. Chairman, may I just at least comment and let the clerk know that I am now in attendance? This is Chester.
Duly noted.
Thank
you,
you, Vinny. Tom already told me, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Mr. Hendershot, Attorney Coyle.
Okay, John, I will make a stab at this. If I knock it off the rails, don't be afraid to interrupt me. It's sort of what I pay you for. As we just discussed in executive session, the matter is a proposed settlement involving a complex FERC issue associated with transmission costs and the processes of arriving at our appropriate compensation for our transmission costs, and more importantly, not overcompensating the other owners of transmission facilities, which to us are the large IOUs on whom we depend for transmission service. So the net result of the years of effort in this FERC docket is that the town of Wallingford it's estimated per an agreed to cost sharing formula and what I'll call a results sharing formula with the other municipal electric systems in New England that joined us in this effort, is that for total costs of in the low to mid $40,000 range, we Wallingford Electric Division are looking at between initial payments and agreed to payments over the next 8 years, a total of roughly $483,500 in revenue, or yes, in revenues for the result of our efforts. So, given that outcome and the results of the process that also made some very important procedural changes to FERC transmission rate making, Attorney Coyle has, I think, correctly recommended that we approve this settlement and move forward accordingly. I concur with that, and that was essentially the vote of the Public Utilities Commission a week ago tonight.
The only thing I'd add to that summary, Rick, is that the other 6 systems with whom you had shared the burdens of this litigation over the last 4 years or so have already signed off on it and approved it. Wallingford is, how do I put this? Wallingford's governance is different than the governance of Massachusetts municipal light plants, and for that reason, we've taken a little longer in order to comply with Wallingford's governance and approval processes before, in order to get appropriate authorization to sign off. But the other 6 systems have already signed off. So the settlement is pending at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and waiting for your signature.
Thank you. With that, questions from the council? Councilor Laffin? No?
Yeah, no, well, Mr. Chairman, then I'll make a motion that we approve the settlement agreement regarding the FERC docket EL 16-19-000 as discussed in executive session.
Second.
Moved and seconded. One last call for questions from the council before I go to the public. Therefore, next is Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Ben Martin, Ward Street. Is this related to the Wallingford leaving CMEC?
No.
So this is just a rate charge change through the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission?
I wouldn't use those exact words, but yes, it's purely a FERC matter, and since we are a consumer of transmission services and an owner of transmission equipment, we're affected by FERC and FERC approved ISO New England transmission rates and rate structures.
Thank you. Is the cost you mentioned before is that the cost in legal fees to get this done, or the cost, is that a different cost that you mentioned?
No, it's the cost of legal and consulting fees to accomplish this result.
And I assume there's a list somewhere of the other people, the other organizations on the settlement?
Sure.
Yeah, Mr. Coyle, oh, I'm sorry, that was an executive session. You wouldn't see that. Yes, there's 6 other Massachusetts systems similar in size and construct to ours that were also part of the group that saw to this.
So there's no other Connecticut municipal utilities in this agreement?
Correct.
Let me just clarify that. CMEC may be a signatory to the overall settlement of the case. They're not a signatory to the specific terms that Wallingford is. CMEC was represented by different counsel in this case. I know they were a party, but I can't say I'm 100% familiar with, well, I shouldn't say that. I am 100% familiar with what they got. They didn't get as much as you did.
Okay, that concludes my questions.
Any other questions from the public?
If I could, there was one clarification I wanted to make to Rick's last statement. The gentleman from the public there, Mr. Martin, who was asked whether the total settlement proceeds were reimbursement for legal fees, and that's not correct. You are being reimbursed for your legal fees, for the town of Wallingford's legal fees for having participated in the case, but you're also being compensated for settlement of certain claims that you would have pursued had the case been litigated. So that is in effect, you could call it a refund on past transmission bills, I guess is probably the best way to look at it. But that's the larger part of it, is really the adjustment of rate issues that we compromised in reaching the settlement. The reimbursement for your litigation costs, your attorney's fees and consulting fees is a rather small part of the 480 some odd thousand that Mr. Hendershot was talking about.
Thank you for that clarification. If there's no further discussion, then Madam Clerk, would you call the roll on the motion, please?
Sure. Fishbein,
Yes.
Laffin,
Yes.
Marone,
Yes.
Morgenstein,
Yes.
Shortell,
Yes.
Tada,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Zandri,
Yes.
and Chairman Cervoni.
Yes,
And the motion passes.
thank you.
Thank
Thank you, Attorney Coyle, Mr. Hendershot. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to leave if that's okay.
You're welcome to leave. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Okay, thanks, Rick. Bye now.
Mr. Chairman, do you still need me for anything?
I believe not.
Okay, then I will depart as well.
All right, thank you.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening. On to item 7, which is Police Chief Wright to answer questions regarding police department policies. Chief, I think you're here with us. Yes, you are.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you for joining us. Good evening. While this is Councilor Morgenstein's item, I just offer you the opportunity to start with any introduction that you might feel appropriate.
No, I don't have much to offer in advance of any questions other than I think that there was some discussion early on, maybe even last week, about defunding or police reform. I can only tell you here locally is, the budget that we request through the office of the mayor and ultimately with the council's approval is that which I need to sustain the services which we provide to our community and that which this community demands of us. And I think we do so with a lot of good intention and with a lot of effort. So absent anything further, Mr. Chairman, I'll await any question.
Thank you, Chief. Councilor Morgenstein, your item.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much, Chief Wright. I
evening.
have a great amount of respect for you and your officers and department. So I wanted to put this forward. I think fellow councilors know that we had many letters from people with concerns. I wanted to have a good, healthy discussion. And I would agree with you completely. We actually, in some ways, have kind of ideal timing here. You could say yes or no. We have literally put through next year's budget pending any problems and should be moving forward with the obligations that we have made in that budget. But I think as we move into a new year, having discussions with you, other departments, putting a plan in place to address issues that have come up and are certainly rising, many protests across the country. So it deserved a conversation here in Wallingford as to our department policies and situations, and public's concern for the necessity of racial justice. So I actually, in putting together, asking for this agenda item, had requested social services, and I found out just the other day that our head of youth and social services has retired. So Craig Turner, who has also been very active with the Coalition for Abetting Wallingford, and your department, which has also worked well with them and has done a good community policing effort, I had hoped to have in the room, because I think there really is this idea not to defund the police, but to encourage sharing of responsibilities, restructuring in ways that put efforts for domestic and social issues into a place that is not, and I'll use your quote, a paramilitary organization where there's this very regimented, we are here to enforce sort of a way of doing things. So again, I have the utmost respect. I don't want to seem at all that we want to undo the good work that you do. But looking at concerns that have been raised elsewhere and where we in Wallingford might make some changes. And I'll just add one last thing that has been kind of stated also in the broader worldview, and that is that although training is very important, we have seen that training does not keep problems from occurring. So at that, Chief, I will just say I know that your policies insofar as chasing, we don't really do car chasing. Some would say, how do I want to put it? I know, I don't believe that your officers are trained in things like chokeholds. I'm really not seeing an issue violence-wise in our department. But again, just looking into if you could address concerns that we've seen in other places and how we in Wallingford might move forward to even better our department and town. So I'll leave it at that. I'm kind of getting fumbled up, and I'll let you speak, sir. Thank you.
So let me try to make sure that I captured it all. So our department is a sworn contingent of 75 from myself right through the rest of the agency. We contain, as you know, the 911 dispatch center here. That is 11 more employees, and then we have roughly 8 or 9 or 10 more support staff. So there's roughly about 100 of us. We are a full service police department. As I stated earlier, this community demands it, and we provide it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I just say that because in a lot of places, either the dispatch center is not there, or they turn their department over to, as an example, the state police after midnight. But we are a 24-hour a day, full service department. So we are an accredited police agency. We're one of a small handful that is Tier 3 accredited through the state of Connecticut. We subject ourselves voluntarily to a very rigid program of over 327 standards that we have to comply with annually. And many of those standards have multi-components to them, some 15 or 20 more in each standard. And I say that to say this: contained within that program, outside of the obvious that you would consider or imagine are a lot of things that keep us in good standing, as they should. So victim and witness services, and dealing with the LGBTQ community, and dealing with hold on one second. I wrote a bunch of these down. So we have 152 different policies, right? And I can tell you that not one of them is any less than a half a dozen pages. So bias profiling, police citizen contacts, recording of police activity, police interaction with disabled persons and those with mental illness, employee performance evaluations, arrest processing, lethality assessment program, which is very specific to domestic violence incidents. So day after day and day in and day out, these policies come into play with everything that we do, right? So the accreditation program are those standards which have been recognized as really cutting edge in law enforcement, and really the standards of excellence. So by following them, it keeps us in good standing. So separate from that, from an operational point of view, I believe that we have a good relationship with our community. I'm confident that although we're not perfect, we are really far reaching into the community by design, right? That's the way that it's been designed. And I think that's been positive, but we're not perfect. So it requires a lot of oversight. And I will tell you that by and large, a lot of problems are eliminated by three things, which might seem simple, or they're simply stated, but it's really much more thorough than that. And that is to hire the right people, train them correctly, and supervise them appropriately. And those three things, if you're able to accomplish that, will keep the agency and our community in good standing. And by appropriate supervision, where something falls off or is of a lesser standard than we require, then we're very quick to launch an internal probe to determine the facts and circumstances of that. I will tell you that last year, we launched 52 internal affairs investigations, sustained 45 of them, and 51 of the 52 were launched by our own review of our officers' actions. And we had one citizen complaint last year. So we'd like to think that we hold ourselves to a higher standard than the community would expect us to. And by that, that's where those internal affairs issues are launched from. I'm not sure, Gina, if that covered everything you were looking for.
So I think, again, and it's not wholly you, but I'll kind of toss it out to the council and to the mayor. Again, we find ourselves in a situation where we currently do not have, we have a temporary social services director, Kenny Michaels, managing some of the administrative roles. Do you, Chief Wright, see a role for, and especially as we're going to be looking to hire someone new, to begin having discussions for some parts of what your department may do that could be handled in a social services capacity, or even a health department capacity? I think we have training that goes on that has to do with, mental health and such. Could you address that at all?
Sure. So if you're not familiar, our youth officers are not sworn police officers. They're civilians, both with advanced degrees in sociology and dealing with social issues. One has a decade at least of experience in residential treatment facilities. So, and they handle a lot of social service related issues that come into the police department through an interaction with a youth in our town. And right now we'll call the youth anyone under 18. But I'll say this about that. Many times, the youth division will get a call from a parent who may have even been a constituent of the youth division when they were a child, looking for assistance with their own children now, having some difficulty in some way, shape, or form, which may or may not be law enforcement related at all. It could be simple rules of the house, right? So, but from that, Gina, there is an interaction, a continual interaction, I would say, between our youth officers and the staff at the Department of Youth and Social Services, right? So there's a lot of overlap there. I think our biggest concern is that no child get kind of left in the gap, or no family gets left in the gap between what we offer and what Craig Turner's office offers. So there's a lot of interaction there. There's a lot of collaboration on what's the best way forward in these incidents. Is there an opportunity there to collapse some resources and maybe drive in a different direction, potentially? The issue for us is to always be mindful of the fact that as the juvenile laws continually change, we need to change with that. So whatever decisions are made moving forward, we need to keep our eye on what that juvenile legislation is, because absent someone qualified to handle youth-related issues through our department or somewhere in town government, the town would be in need of a juvenile review board where decisions that are being made in real time now, today, would have to be made by a review board on more of a planned calendar, once a month or once every other week. So there's a lot of that interaction going on now. I think the town offers a wide variety of programs to our community in that regard. And I'm confident that we're meeting the needs of our community to the best of our ability.
Yeah, and again, I would say that what people across the country are looking for are the sort of services that you are speaking of being provided. If they are provided in a non-officer setting, some of the difficulties in conversing with, a social worker or a, trained, and obviously your people are trained, but that is not an officer of the law, I think is what people are starting to think, could certainly be. And so again, I think a wider discussion, again, for, again, hiring who or how. And again, if we were to look more now next year for who is divided from where. So again, not really yours completely to answer, and we don't have the opportunity right now with a social services director. So I appreciate your input, and I would ask Mr. Chairman, I would assume that we will hopefully after the council open up for members of the public that may actually have more specific questions for the chief and ideas that they have heard as they've been involved in some of these things that are currently going on. So I will yield at present. Thank you so much, Chief Wright.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chief, for joining us, and thank you for participating. At this point, I don't see questions from the council. I'm going to remind the public that if you are going to speak or ask a question, please give your name, full name and address. And the first member of the public who is asked to speak is Jacqueline S.
Hi, yes, good evening. This is Jacqueline Serna, Clifton Street. Thank you for taking my question, Chief. In a recent press conference regarding the murder of a Hispanic teenager here in Wallingford, a spokesperson for the department thanked the Spanish-speaking officer from Meriden PD for helping with the investigation. As a member of the Hispanic community here in Wallingford, it's extremely disappointing to hear that our PD has to resort to borrowing services from a neighboring department. This conveys the message that we are not prepared to serve a prominent and important part of our community. So my question is, what steps will you take to increase diversity among your officers at the Wallingford PD?
So, and I know that got some play in the newspaper and through our, well, we created it through our press conference, but let me kind of back up a little bit, if I may, Jacqueline, and kind of frame a response. So we have many officers here, female and male, who are Spanish speaking. Some are Latino, some are not Latino. I have a couple of officers here who are actually trilingual. So the reason for Meriden's assistance is this. Very early on in the Nolvin Diaz, and I want to be very careful because it's a pending case. Very early on in the Nolvin Diaz investigation, we were led to Meriden with a pretty good lead. It took us to Meriden. And this goes on in law enforcement all the time. It happens every day. So out of respect for the Meriden Police Department, we reached out to them, told them what we were working on, told them what our needs were. They assigned an officer to help us in Meriden because this officer was familiar with the people that we were looking to speak to. And in the end, that whole lead fell apart. It was not connected to our case at all. But Meriden PD agreed to have that officer shadow our case, if you will, in our building in the event that another lead broke that would have taken us back to Meriden, right? So that he was now attached to our case, could help us in Meriden find the people we were looking for, et cetera, et cetera. And in the end, as you're familiar with, a family member was arrested for the murder of Nolvin Diaz. I will tell you that we used our Latino speaking officers who are actually Latino to do the family notification to the Diaz family. They are only Spanish speaking. And I can tell you that I'm incredibly proud of them on that day for interacting with the Diaz family and what was absolutely a horrible moment in their life. So we do have Spanish speaking officers. Some are Latino, some are not. I have officers who are, as I stated, trilingual. So in relation to your question about diversity in the agency, the newspaper ran an article not long ago about our diversity, and there's a lot of thought nationally in law enforcement that your department should reflect the community in which it serves. And if you look at the census demographics against the makeup of our department, I will tell you that we are somewhat short in the Latino percentage, right? So I believe that through the census data, Wallingford is approximately 13% Latino, and I think we're about 9% Latino in our sworn ranks. But in all the other designations, we're right where we need to be. So, what happens when we need to hire a new police officer? The HR department makes that announcement through a compendium of different organizations that we do regular interaction with. So the Spanish Community of Wallingford, the NAACP of Meriden Wallingford. We get down to New Haven. We do college fairs at a number of universities. We have open houses here, trying to attract the best candidate. And then we work from a list of those that apply. Now, I will tell you that the hiring standards here for the town of Wallingford are very rigid, and they're very rigid for good reason. It absolutely keeps the hiring process fair. So if I need one officer, the Human Resources Department will send me the list of 5 names off of that test, and we will process those 5 people. And then for every opening I have after that, so if I have 2 openings, I'll get 6 names, and we work very closely with those 6 names. I have to justify it to HR when we've exhausted those 6 names, and then they give me another small handful. So what that allows for is, it prohibits us, if you will, from reaching down into that list to number 55 or 65 because somebody knows somebody who knows somebody. And that's the reason we do that. So I will tell you that the hiring process is very rigid, but it is absolutely fair. And we encourage everyone, regardless, to apply to us in the event that we're looking to hire officers. I'm not sure if that answers your question or not.
It does, thank you.
All right, the next question is from somebody named Zunera. If you could please give us your full name and address.
Hello, I'm Zanera Raza, and I'm from 6th Store Street. First, I would like to thank you, police officer, for your service, police chief, excuse me, for your service towards Wallingford and for keeping the Wallingford citizens safe. So I had a question about the 8 policies that have arised up, and many people are insisting that they're implemented into their town's system. And I was wondering which of these policies are already in the policing system in Wallingford, and would you consider implementing them into our systems? And the policies are banning chokeholds and strangleholds, requiring de-escalation, require warning before shooting, requires police officers to exhaust all alternatives before shooting, a duty to intervene, ban shooting at moving vehicles, require use of force continuum, and require comprehensive reporting.
So we satisfy all of those benchmarks. I can tell you that there's a push now back to the use of force continuum away from a threat matrix. And I can tell you that we are one of the last agencies to still have the use of force continuum. And now it looks like that potentially is going to work in our favor because it's something we're very familiar with. So, and I don't know if work in our favor is the right phrase, but I think you know what I'm saying. The rest of the things, I've been here almost 25 years. We've prohibited chokeholds from the moment I arrived here. I'm not sure how long before that they were prohibited, but I will tell you that chokeholds are prohibited unless you are into a deadly use of force situation, and then they are permissible should it be appropriate. So at that moment in time where the officer believes that he or she is likely to suffer their own death, or another person, right, is likely to suffer death, the officer is authorized to use a chokehold. But other than that, it's otherwise prohibited, and that needs to be in place for all the obvious reasons. All of the other components of those 8 policies that you spoke of, we've already been doing. We've been doing de-escalation for years. We've been not shooting at moving cars for years. And we never have, fortunately. So a lot of those things, I think that, and I will tell you up front for those that know me, we are not perfect, but we are hardworking. But a lot of the things that you bring up are not new here. They're, philosophies and values and systems that we have that have been in play for a long, long time. In fact, we're just now getting ready to instruct the whole agency annually, once again, on use of force. It's something we take very seriously. It's something that we continually drill into our resources. I will tell you that use of force, even when it's appropriate, lawful, and administered correctly, is ugly. I think we can all agree on that. It's never pretty. It's always ugly. So we're worried about it. Right. And we worry about it for the protection of our community, the protection of visitors to our town, and to our officers. So it's something we take very, very seriously. But the components of those 8 policies that you speak of are not new here. We've been doing most of that for as long as I've been here.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. The next is Kevin or Cindy Sigovich.
Good evening, and thank you. Kevin and Cindy Sigovich, 131 Prince Street. Just a question for Chief Wright. Chief, thank you for your service, number one. But how can the public access the policies you refer to?
So there are a number of policies that are available to the general public. I can tell you that there's a small handful that are not. They're protected under FOI, or Freedom of Information. And those are simply undercover operations and things like that. But 95% of our policies are available to the public. All you need to do is make a request through us, through our records unit, and we will get those for you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Next up is Amber Christensen. Did I pronounce that correctly? I hope. In light of the silence, I'm going to move ahead to Mr. Martin, Ben Martin.
Thank you. Ben Martin, Ward Street. I just want to comment first that I want to compliment the chief on the job the police have done in the last few weeks. I've been involved in some public events in the streets of Wallingford, and I believe the police have acted appropriately, and I appreciate that. I would like to ask if the police have received any excess military gear through the programs of the Department of Defense to send that to local police departments.
No, we have not taken advantage of any opportunities through the 1033 program.
Thank you. Also, do you have officers that are knowledgeable of sign language or communicating with the deaf community?
Yes.
Great. And I guess the final question is, in your hiring processes, do you, I guess I don't know if the word is weed out or deny candidates who have previous force complaints with other departments?
So if I may, let me just give a background on what the hiring process consists of. And it doesn't matter whether you come from another agency to us, which we have many lateral transfer candidates here, or you're a fresh officer who needs to go through the academy. So you take that previously discussed written test, an oral exam, a physical fitness test, which gives you the opportunity to apply to us, right? So thereafter, we get those 5 names, if you will. We work that list, and then the first thing we do before we even meet you is send you off to a pre-employment polygraph, preconditional offer. So now we have your application and a polygraph, and we look to see how one marries up to the other. From that, now we'll have an interview with you if your polygraph is sufficient. We'll see what the comments in your interview meet up with your written application and first polygraph. After that, we give you a conditional offer of employment if you're satisfactory to us and a candidate we'd like to hire. Now, once you have that conditional offer, that triggers a bunch of other exams, a second polygraph, a psychological exam, a comprehensive background exam. For those officers that are coming to us from other agencies, we truly, really deeply look at not only what their personnel jackets may find, but more importantly, what doesn't the personnel jacket reveal, right? So, and we're confident in our background investigation detail. So, and then we take all of that, right, and we look at it again. And is there any inconsistencies? Is there any concern? What is the psychologist saying? What is the polygrapher concerned about? And we look at that, and I will tell you, Mr. Martin, that 99.5% of the people that we put through that process never get in the door. And there's just something there that is not worthy of wearing our badge. We're known to be fairly rigid about that. I don't apologize for it. It costs the town a lot of money for us to put a candidate through that. But we would rather carry a vacancy than put the wrong employee on our roll. So, and that costs the town money, right? Backfilling an open position. So it's a rigid process, and we weed out, we hope, 99.5% of the problems that that we don't want to encourage or encounter, rather.
Okay, thank you.
I went back to forgive me. I went back to Amber Christensen, and I actually tried to unmute your computer. And so I'm going to ask your question for you. And the question is, what is the life cycle of a complaint? Can we make the record of complaints as well as the status? And a statement, there needs to be an independent, there absolutely needs to be an independent body to review and investigate these complaints, or else there will be an intrinsic bias. Chief?
So the life cycle of a complaint starts with either our own review or from a citizen complaint. And the process there is you can file your complaint with us however you think you want to. We'll take your call over the phone. We'll take an email from you. We'll take a written letter from you. We'll take third-party complaints from you if you don't want to come in yourself, if you want to have somebody else come in. And then we look at the facts and circumstances of that which has been reported to us. And prior to any formal launching of an internal affairs investigation, which is a very formal process, we look at the complaint first administratively. We'll dial up any cruiser camera recordings that we have, any statements that may have been taken. We look at case reports for events that may lend some information. And if we can't make sense of it ourselves administratively, if there's just not enough there, we'll assign an investigator to it. From that moment in time, the complainant is put on notice from me formally that the complaint's been received. We'll give you the complaint tracking number. We'll tell you who the investigating supervisor is. And he or she will more than likely be in contact with the complainant very quickly, not only one to introduce themselves, but two, to go through this very discussion we're having, what the process consists of. The investigations can take sometimes 2-3 days, and other times it can take 2 or 3 months, depending on how far and wide the complaint is. We may assign other officers, supervisors to the investigation based on some significant level of expertise they may have. We'll consult with outside resources if we have to. If it appears to be criminal in nature, we'll seek the guidance of the prosecutor. And I say that to say this, all of that has a lot to do with case law and where we need to tread very lightly in certain circumstances as relates to how the case is going to proceed. From there, the investigating supervisor will file a very formal report to my office for review. I may accept the report as it's written, the investigation. I may send it back for more work. I may send it out for independent review. I may send it out to Labor Council that the town has under contract. I may send it to the HR director for his review. And from that, I get a pretty good sense, not only from myself and the administrative team, being the deputy and the captain, but comments from these other professionals as well as to where we're going. And from there, the case may turn either to a criminal charge, which happens very rarely, fortunately, here, or to some level of discipline based on the satisfying the standards of just cause, which we're required to do in internal affairs investigations. There's 7 very specific standards that we need to satisfy to be successful in administering discipline. Our records are open for inspection. Some of the stuff is very confidential when it gets to health records and mental health records of either our officer or the complaining party. But regardless, the newspaper has a, I think it's a standing request through the HR department for internal affairs records not only from us, I think from all town departments. So they're accessible and available in accordance with law.
Thank you, Chief. Just for the record, Amber is a resident of Sorrento Road, and she did follow up with a question about accessing those records. And Chief, I think you did indicate that a Freedom of Information request is what does the trick. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Through the Records Division.
Thank you. Next up is Andrea Cerna.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for taking my question. My question for you is, does the Wallingford Police Department have any plans to improve or launch any community outreach programs or events that can help better the relationship with the community and your officers?
Yes, so we have a number of outreach programs now. Obviously, everything has been put on hold with COVID. But I will tell you that through all of our efforts, we finally were able to, and it's an event that's been on our 5-year plan for the last, 3.5 years or so, to launch a Citizens Academy. We finally got it done. It took a lot of effort. We wanted it done correctly. We put out applications. We had an abundant number of people apply to take part in it. It'll be a 10 or 12-week program. We got all our instructors ready to go. They're all certified by the Police Academy to teach these certain core areas. It was going to be a really well done program, which was our intent. And just as we were to launch it, everyone had been notified of the dates. COVID hit. And obviously, our building was shut down for a period of time. We couldn't allow anybody into the building, certainly not in that environment. So we're going to launch that again, hopefully in the fall, if we're able to gather 25 or 30 people in one room. I'd rather not do it remotely. I think that, that in-person exchange of ideas and information is critical to it having as much meaning as we can possibly get out of it. So that's in the works, right? We're ready to go on it. It's just a scheduling thing. So what else have we done? We've hosted a number of Coffee with a Cop, those informal conversations. We've had them at commercial establishments. We've had them at the Hubcap downtown. We've hosted one here. We've had an open house. Between community police and our youth division, I probably would say that there are 50 to 75 programs which run through those two divisions. The traffic division is consistently busy giving presentations on speed-related issues and traffic enforcement issues, primarily in the high schools, where we like to get to those vulnerable segments of our population as quickly as we can. So we're pretty busy. But if you have a program that you'd like us to run, we're continually at the senior center when we can be. We're continually at the public library when we can be. We've been, as I mentioned, kind of shut down like everyone has. So if you have a program that you're specifically looking for, you can let us know. You can call my office and we'll get you directed to the right person who can hopefully assist you with that which you're requesting.
Ms. Cerna, your address for the record, please.
Yes, it's Clifton Street. Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Up next is Rajan During.
Rajan Deering of Sharon Drive. Just want to say that I think it's wonderful that we have Chief Wright with us tonight. Chief Wright, I really appreciate everything that you do for our community and everything that your department does for our community. Councilor Morgenstein and the rest of the council, thank you for adding this to the agenda. I think it's wonderful to be able to get this conversation going with the community. I want to echo what Ms. Cerna said. Really appreciate everything you guys are doing in terms of outreach. And I think the more outreach that you can do, the better it'll be for our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Fran Persino.
Good evening, Chief Wright and Council and Mayor. I'd like to thank you very much, Chief Wright, for the work that you've done for our community. And I want to ask your opinion. Is there anything you think the town can do better, say in our less affluent neighborhoods? Are there programs you think that might be helpful to maybe cut down on any kind of lawlessness that may occur?
No, nothing specific. I think what's important is that this community, one of the things I find most impressive anyway, is how this town, one, cares for itself, and two, isn't going to stand for, any nonsense, if you will, right? So, and we need that. For our success, we need that partnership with the community. So specifically, I can't think of anything that would be of great assistance to us other than which we're already getting, right? So this community has a very open-armed approach with us. Whenever we need anything, there's always an open-armed approach with how can we help, what can we do? And we're appreciative of that because I think collectively all of us are really responsible for our own success. So, I really, you can see in communities where that relationship is not present. It's a tough go for law enforcement. You cannot be in conflict with the community. You have to be a partner where you can be, a shoulder where you have to be, and really a resource all the time. We don't close here. Our doors are always open. Certainly, we're not always here individually 24 hours a day, but our doors are always open. It's very easy to get to us here. There was a question a couple moments ago about internal affairs work. On our town website, you will find our internal affairs policy and the internal affairs complaint form, both in English and in Spanish. Maria Harlow, when she was the executive director at SCOW, helped us to correctly translate the form into Spanish, and you can find that there. So not specifically are there things that we're in need of, except to continue to maintain the partnership that we currently have. It's absolutely critical.
Thank you, Chief Wright. Just one policy question. I'm of the opinion that you have body cams on all of the officers. Is that not true?
That's not true.
Oh, they don't. They don't. Okay.
No. So there's cruiser video cameras, and in the request for the next fiscal year's budget 2021, I have requested actually a large sum of money that I'm hopeful to seek reimbursement for body cameras for the entire agency.
That's impressive. Will you be setting up policies regarding those cameras, when they could be turned off? I'm assuming, of course, during break times, not allowed, but will there be any other times that they'll be allowed to be turned off?
Yes, so there's a statewide policy, which is kind of the floor for body-worn cameras. And there are a number of incidents that they shall be turned off. As an example, domestic violence incidents where one party or the other may be in compromising clothing, if you will. Some of those intimate areas of someone's home, we may have the audio on, right, to capture the audio, but the video might not be on. So that statewide policy is kind of the floor. But I will tell you, the state has many policies that you're required to at least meet the minimum threshold for. And if we met the threshold of the state policies in a lot of ways, we would have to come down from where we currently are to meet that threshold. So yes,
Thank
the
you so much
policy will be rigid.
Okay, thank you so much for your answers. Have a good night now.
Ms. Persino, your address for the record, please.
Oh, I beg your pardon. 14 Jackson Avenue.
Thank you very much. And I'm just going to unmute those on the telephone to see if there are any questions for the chief before we move on.
I have a question.
Your name and address for the record, please.
Is Alexandria Johnson, and it's 487 North Main Street.
Go ahead.
And my question is actually in line with what was just asked. I wanted to know about the body cameras, so that's answered. So the rest of my question is, when are the car cameras turned on? Are they just always running?
So the hard drives are always running. The cameras are turned on for a number of different reasons. Stops of motor vehicles, pedestrian, what we call pedestrian stops, right? You know, a call for suspicious activity of a person who's around a business that's closed in that regard. That's always on. But we encourage of the officers, and most of them follow our encouraging guidance to turn it on all the time. You know, if you're out of the car, although the camera may not capture the video, the lapel mic that the officer wears on his or her shirt will capture all of the audio. So we encourage that in any regard once they're out of the car. So we have a lot of recording. It's not always the video that captures the entire event. A lot of the times it's completely audio. And I'll give you an example. We had a complaint on the north end of town over the weekend of a young man doing something that was reported that he shouldn't be doing. The call came to us. And very quickly thereafter our encounter, we received a very formal complaint from him that I previously described how that process works. And we went right to the cruiser camera, and there was that interaction. I can tell you unequivocally that none of the allegations as made, I'm not sure what was going on there with this certain person, but none of the allegations that were made were sustained whatsoever. So, and our officers, they know that, right? So they're running the cameras as often as they can, and the body cameras will fill in that little bit of dead time that we have now. And we're truly looking forward to the day that we can roll that out. The bid spec is over at purchasing as we speak.
Very good. Thank you very, very much. And thank you for the great job that you all do protecting us.
You're welcome.
We have a request from Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening.
We've heard a lot tonight about body cams, and my question has to do with retention. I know there is no state guidelines. I think Post put out some recommendations, but considering that we're in the open wilderness with regard to retention, what are you putting into place as far as period of time to retain information from body cam, whether it be video or audio?
So we're required to keep presently cruiser camera recordings for 30 days. We keep them for 60, just in case something may trickle in after that 30 days, either from our own review or from a concern from the community. Or otherwise, if we tag the video, you know, if we're certain that there's something there we're going to hold on to, we tag the video, and then it never goes away until we get rid of it. So, and then our servers are set up, Councilor Fishbein, to roll that video off of the server after that 60-day period. I would imagine that the volume of of body-worn camera recordings that we're going to take in will probably dictate that we roll that stuff off probably in that same time frame. It takes up a lot of data. I think the storage space on the server that we're speccing to combine all of this is well over 20 terabyte just to handle it all.
We not only have that retention, but we've discussed the retention of the scanning of plates also, which I thought your retention period was 90 days self-imposed.
Self-imposed, but I think you're familiar that the state of Connecticut handles the server capacity for the license plate reader. And then thereafter, whatever their policies are there.
Yeah, okay. All right, that's all I had. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
We have another question from Ben Martin.
Thank you. As to the video retention, I was just curious, is that something that's contracted out to another company or is it handled internally by the police department?
We handle it all internally. 90% of what's out there in police recordings is handled remotely. I want to handle our own. I want to have access to our recordings. I want to have complete control and authority over maintaining that. It's probably much more expensive to do it the way that we're doing it, but it's not something that I'm going to fool around with either. So we're going to handle all that here.
Okay, thank you.
And Counselor Laffin?
Yeah, no, thank you. I just wanted to thank the chief, not just for your service, but to kind of emphasize your answers into what some of the people from the public have been asking. And you've been incredibly approachable, not just during this, but in the past. You always come to our meetings when requested. When there was the school security scares and questions in prior years, you've always made yourself available and very open, not just to the council and the administration, but to members of the public. So I appreciate that, and I know everybody else does. I just wanted to thank you again for how transparent and open you are in doing everything. So thank you.
It's our honor.
Thank you, Chief. I see no more questions from the public, and of course, we're grateful for the time you've taken and the candor you've expressed, and but quite frankly, we've grown to expect and appreciate this from you. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chief Wright.
You're welcome.
All right. With that, we will move along to item 8 on the agenda, which is the council's response to the mayor's veto of the council's budget. Councilor Shortell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I make a motion that the town council overturn the mayor's veto of June 15th on the budget.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion on the motion from the council. I think I saw a wave from Councilor Morgenstein.
Yeah, it might seem a little abrupt, but there's no need to discuss. We had a big discussion. We came to an agreement. This body should have the power that it has and let this stand. I need no discussion personally. Thank you.
Thanks for discussing the fact that you have no discussion. Any other discussions about no discussion? And anything from the public? Councilor Laffin? You're still muted.
Thank you. It's right, as Councilor Morgenstein said, it's been discussed, and we've already talked a lot about it, but I still get questions on the overall process and everybody's position. So I just wanted to address what will end up being my lack of support for the override and continued support of my previous stance. Just hopefully, just really succinctly, and then this is really just about the larger details of how we get there thing for me. And I know that may be lost or missed in some of the communications. I know that I often come off more rational than emotional, but my heart really was or is for a no tax increase. I've been vocal on it for months and then shared some ideas on how to get there. Those plans either unfortunately won't work at this time, or those directions don't have enough support over the present plan, which is fine. My heart is for the no tax increase, more so than even in years before, but my philosophy over the source and quantity of funds that are being moved with an already large dependence on the general fund make me uncomfortable. And it's larger than we've experienced in the past, our dependence on the general fund. And also I'm worried about a potential poor grand list return for next year. So those edge out for the purposes of these votes regarding the details of the specific plan, where my heart is versus the philosophy. And it's a philosophy that I've governed with for a couple, for 10 years of different budget votes between the Board of Ed and the Town Council. Yes, people are hurting. The zero is a great thing. It's even important in a time like this. It's just the details run contrary to that individual philosophy. Again, my appreciation to Councilor Shortell for the thoughtful cuts and to the other councilors for their efforts in trying to make it happen. We just disagree on some of the details at this time. I just felt like there were other ways to close the gap further. And I sincerely and genuinely hope that for the next budget that the movements of these accounts that I'm not comfortable with go smoothly, or we're able to kind of smooth them out and work it out for next year so all this goes okay. So thanks.
I haven't said a lot through the budget process, but I just do want to explain where I sit on this position. I don't anticipate that that the state of the budget from our last regular meeting is going to change tonight, having seen what the votes have been. But some of the things, in addition to the concerns that Councilor Laffin expressed, in December, we voted unanimously to approve a union contract for the firefighters. In that contract were 16 new EMT positions. So there's a growth in the department. There's also raises that we have to look forward to funding in the coming budget year. And so when you look at the fact that expenses in those departments weren't cut, that we didn't cut a lot of salary lines, you have to be concerned about being able to fund that going forward. And I again appreciate all the effort that went into coming up with the matrix that resulted in the zero. I've said that before. I don't like the use of the pilot money from the electric division to offset the tax increase. The cap and non program has been well funded historically by the pilot money, and I think it's something that we should certainly continue in the future. With that, we have comment from Councilor Morone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say that I think that this is the first year that we've really passed a bipartisan agreement in excess of what the mayor's done, and I think I'm just very proud of what we've accomplished. I also think it's mildly ironic that the Republican chair and vice chair have to spend so much time explaining why it is they're voting for a tax increase. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I see no further comment from the council. I see no further comment from the public. And so, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Fishbein,
Yes.
Laffin,
No.
Morone,
Yes.
Morgenstein,
Yes.
Shurtell,
Yes.
Tata,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Dandry,
Yes.
Chairman Savoni.
No.
The motion passes.
7 votes. The veto is overturned. And with that, we have no further business on the agenda. So I will turn off the recording.
No, yes, we do.
Oh, yeah, we do.
Sorry.
Yes,
We do, the auditor contract. On to item 9. You have a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move that we award the auditor contract for the fiscal years 2020, 2021, and 2022 to Bloom Shapiro.
Is there a second? I'll second the motion. So pursuant to the vote of the council, when we began this little process, we did go out to bid for this professional service. Bid specs were drawn up and the bid was published. We got 2 responses. One was from Bloom Shapiro and the other one was from Markham. Mr. Bose, if you feel compelled, you can augment what I'm saying or correct it. I think we expected to get at least 2 more bids on the audit, and we only got the 2 we got. We did have a committee of counselors appointed to review. That was Counselor Laffin, Counselor Zandri, and myself. And in reviewing those with Mr. Bose, it was determined that the Markham proposal did not meet the bid specifications. And here we are with Bloom Shapiro as the qualified bidder. So, Mr. Bose, do you have anything to add to that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We did summarize things in a couple of memos that we had sent out to the council members over the last couple of weeks, I believe, which I think sum it up. So with that, I'll just leave it at that and respond to any questions that anyone has.
Thank you, Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Mr. Bose. Just trying to ascertain, I thank you for all the backup. I think I read just about everything. And am I to understand that, let me ask you this, how did we let the public know that this contract was available to be bid on?
Well, in accordance with the purchasing ordinance, we advertised it in a paper that has a local readership presence, obviously, which is the Meriden newspaper. We also sent, we have an electronic bid notification system that we put into place about 5 years ago. And it replaced the old bidders lists, if you will. So any company that's asked to be on certain specific lists, we send them that electronic notification. There are over 50 or 60 companies on that list for this type of a service. We sent that electronic notification out to all of them. So those are the primary ways in which we advertise this process.
Am I to understand that those electronic communications were to businesses that are located in Connecticut or across the country?
They are primarily Connecticut, but there are some outside of Connecticut firms that are on that list. I apologize. I thought I brought it into this room with me for tonight, but we certainly do have it available if anyone would like to see it. That's also on that list is not only a professional fiscal or accounting firms per se, but there's also firms that I would say broker for clients that they used to be called clipping services. And back in the old days when bids used to be clipped out of newspapers by certain companies because they retained clients that they would then contact and say, hey, this product or this service is being bid by this city or this town, you know, and they'd be on some type of contract or have some type of contractual relationship. So there are, I believe, a few of those firms that are on that list as well to reach possibly out of state companies as well. But I don't have a breakdown right in front of me of how many, but I would say by far most of them are Connecticut companies.
So what's the timing on this? You know, because I guess one remedy here could be, hey, we didn't get enough bidders. We'd like to, you know, see what else is out there. Can we have $1,000 to publish in the Washington Post you know, or something like that to perhaps garner more interest. So what's our timing here?
Well, our timing, we'd like to get somebody obviously appointed soon so they can come in and start doing the preliminary work for before year end or just after year end, before the books are closed. So it'd be much sooner than later. And my second thought on that is I don't know if trying a larger type of publication would actually glean anybody else who might want to come forward and propose. As I've said in my written documentation, I contacted 3 of the companies that I thought would bid because they've expressed the desire to do so in the past, and 2 of them were very, very open and candid with me, and I shared those responses, I believe, with you folks on the council in one of the memos that I sent. So I don't know if it would actually glean anybody else.
Is it something that somebody has to physically be here? Or, you know, is there electronic medium that perhaps somebody in Seattle can render the same documentary product?
We do send some records right now to any firm, the current firm actually, electronic transactions detail, for example, detailed expenditures, so they can pull their samples right from their offices. And there is a little bit more of electronic data presentation to them, if you will. But it does require quite a bit of physical inspection. There's a fixed asset audit, and there's other, you know, audits that just tend to work a little bit better when you're in the physical presence of your client.
So as part of this audit process, the auditors actually audit the physical assets, or they review what your office inventoried as far as physical assets?
Both, actually, both. They start with our records and trace to the source, and then they'll start out in the field and then trace back to our records.
But their review is just a spot check. I think it's, what is it? It's 2 per 270 or something like that. That they actually look at the backup.
I don't know how much they test for each portion of their audit. I don't know what their sampling sizes are, but I think that would vary actually from firm to firm as well. And as they test, if they don't find things in their initial stages of testing, they may not test more going forward. If they find something that is a little bit maybe harder for them to understand, or something that they think has to be explained a little bit or might look a little bit different than they expected, then they're going to test a little bit more.
Yeah, I think based upon the error rate, it has to do with how far they go. So we have 2 bidders on this, and your backup indicates that at least one of the entities that we had expected to bid is not doing this anymore. Expecting that the next time 3 years from now we run into this, there's only 1 bidder. How do we improve this situation?
That's a great question. And I've talked at length with Sal Amadeo, our purchasing agent, about it. Matter of fact, it was Sal who strongly encouraged me to call some of these firms and see what's going on with them as part of the process, which I did and communicated to the council. In speaking to 1 or 2 partners, it seems like it depends on what their goals organizational wide are. The firm of Bloom Shabaro has, they're one of the largest firms independent in the nation, actually. They're probably one of the, you know, the West Hartford office, and they've had some other satellite offices. They've got to be well over 200 accountants. So they're relatively large, and they've got a lot of components, and they have a component that deals primarily with local government municipalities, and their focus being Connecticut. They do 51 towns, I believe, in the state of Connecticut. So they probably reach some type of, economies of scale based upon their knowledge and training in that field. So which probably helps them. And it's, they view it as a very, very important part of their overall business. And I believe some firms probably don't. But how we maybe entice other people in the future, it's a great question. It's something that we're going to be addressing. But I think first and foremost is for me to keep in contact with at least two of the partners of other firms that I've known for 20 plus years and say, stay on them. To say, hey, folks, in a couple of years, our contract is up and our council is going to be looking to go back out. Keep room for us or something like that. Another, well, I don't want to say tactic, but another option might be not using the two-part bid process and using more of an RFP process. I think a lot of professional firms, the so-called white-collar firms, if you will, are a lot more accustomed to responding to requests for proposals rather than sort of hardcore, old-fashioned type of bids. But the two or three, I actually called three firms, two responded to me. One has not responded to me, and I don't know why in this process. But that's part of my task going forward is to keep on, at least with the partners, or at least with a couple firms that I know of, to say, hey, make sure that you're going to be around, and if you're going to be focusing on this, keep us in contact, and let's keep the dialogue open.
And how much do we spend on the audit on an annual basis?
This current, the most current audit, fiscal year 2019, was $107,500. The 3-year, the 3-year bid prices that were opened just last week, that I believe I communicated to you, were 107, 108. $108,200, and then $108,200 for the 2022 audit, I believe.
So certainly, well, let me ask you this. If a company out of Los Angeles, which I'm sure, not many businesses in Los Angeles or in California know about this being open, bid on this, got it, it would be practical that they could do most of the work electronically and then send an auditor here for a week to stay in a hotel to look at the physical. If we're going to spend $170,000 on this, isn't that possible here?
Is it possible? I don't want to say that nothing is impossible, but I think it's probably not going to happen from an out-of-state firm unless they had a local presence. If they were, way back in the day, there was called the Big 8 accounting firms. Now they're basically called the Big 4 due to mergers, acquisitions, and Arthur Anderson going under with the whole Enron deal, et cetera, et cetera. If they did have an office in, let's say, Hartford or Stanford, which some of them used to, I'm sure, as a matter of fact, a couple of those firms are on our bid list. They may not do it as part of their audit practice.
But why couldn't a company from Los Angeles do the work? I just didn't hear that in your answer, because they're not local. Got that.
Well, they may not do municipal work, and if they did, they are going to be held responsible to do certain audit procedures that are in accordance with state statutes, especially when it comes to the Connecticut, what they call the State Single Audit Act, which is I send you folks 3 audits: the CAFR, which is obviously the general purpose audit, and then 2 other audits. One is a federal grant audit, and the other one's a state grant audit. They may not have the knowledge of those state programs, and frankly, the startup cost to do something like that for someone who does not have that knowledge could be prohibitive.
Well, it appears to me we haven't even looked at it. It's like lawyers. You get a Connecticut lawyer who's licensed to practice in Florida and Georgia, New Jersey, maybe New York. I've run into accountants like that too, who are able to practice. Well, I guess one of my final questions: how many years in a row has Bloom Shapiro had this contract?
I didn't go back and look. I believe they've been here since 2004 or 2005. But this is the third time we've gone, public with it, if you will.
Yeah, so that's a lot of years. And that's generally my concern, many times fresh eyes give a new perspective, and I'm very concerned about those in this world that know about the opportunity to earn this money. And well, I thank you for the answers to the questions. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're very welcome. If I may, Councilman Craig, when you responding to one of my responses or following up, I believe you said 170,000. It's 107, not 170.
No problem.
I didn't know if I said, yeah, absolutely. No argument that it's a lot of money, but I just didn't want, I don't want to leave you with the impression that I said 170.
Councilor Testa.
I'm all set. Thank you.
Any other comments from the council? Comments from the public? There being none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Fishbein,
No.
Lappin,
Yes.
Marone,
Yes.
Morgenstein,
I'm gonna just be ornery and abstain because we really had no choice here. And so what we say really doesn't matter. So I'm just gonna abstain. Thank you.
thank you. Shortell,
Yes.
Tata,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Dandry,
Yes.
Chairman Savoni.
Yes.
The motion passes.
All right then. With that, I'm just going to look and check and make sure.
Move adjourned.
There is no further business on tonight's agenda. And therefore, I will stop the recording and end the meeting and call it adjourned.
Thank you, folks. Have a good evening.
Good night, all.
Good night.
This conference is no longer being recorded.